Hi, everybody. Welcome to Core Light's Spiritual Weather Report. It is January 4th, 2026. This is Brad, and I'm back in South Africa. And we have a very special session for you today. Shift happens in 2026. Remember, it's got an F in it. And we're going to be looking at the year ahead through the lens of astrology. And this is something we don't normally do on the Spiritual Weather Report, but I am delighted to have with us our guest speaker, who is my dear friend and colleague and a master astrologer, Stephanie Austin. So, welcome, Stephanie.
Oh, it's a great honor and pleasure to be here, Brad. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So, let me start by reading your bio. So, people who don't know you, I think most people might know you because you've been around Corelight for quite a while. But here is Stephanie's short bio. Stephanie's involvement with astrology began with a childhood love of astronomy and math. She was initially very skeptical of astrology, but began studying it in 1985 while obtaining a master's degree in interdisciplinary consciousness studies at John F. Kennedy University. She's been a full-time astrologer since 1993 and involved in various healing arts since 1974. And I wanted to add, I'm going to read something from Stephanie's website that I really liked. Stephanie's organization is called Eco Astrology. Eco Astrology forecasts, sessions, and classes combine mysticism and mythic archetypes with transpersonal psychology and the new physics. It's an evolutionary approach, emphasizing potentials, not predictions, focusing on what we came to learn and what we came to share. So I really like that part, especially the part about emphasizing potentials, not predictions, because that's so much of what I often talk about on the spiritual weather reports is, there's no set future. The future exists in potentials only. And so I love how that's one of the reasons I love your astrology so much, Stephanie, is because that's, we work in a similar way. And so you used to be a skeptic of astrology, which I find very funny because you're so good at astrology and you've been a master astrologer professional for so many years. So would you tell us a little bit more about that and what was it that changed your mind?
Well, until I was in my early 30s, I'd never been exposed to real astrology. I just read the Sunday sun sign columns, and I that was what I knew about astrology. Well, that's like fortune cookies, right? But then while I was in graduate school, I met this very intelligent, very spiritual woman who was an astrologer. I got, well, if she's into this, there must be something I don't know. So I asked her to do a reading for me, and I was blown away with how she validated things in me that no one else had acknowledged. And it was so affirming. I felt like she was reading my soul. And I said, how did you do that? I want to know how you did that. I've got to know how to do that. And I couldn't put the books down after that. I was just totally grabbed by it. I got the astrology bug and has not let go yet yet.
Well, and we were talking before the call when we were preparing together on a private call. We were talking about that's something we have in common. I was also very skeptical about astrology when I first heard about it, and for the same reasons you mentioned. And then it was my life partner, Leslie Temple Thurston, who was into astrology, and I thought it was a little out there, but the more that I learned, the more I realized just how accurate it can be when somebody who really knows what they're doing can look at your chart and collectively as well. I know what we're going to talk about. We wanted to share with the group what we have in common, how we met. Would you like to speak about it's through Leslie, through our mutual connection with Leslie, my spouse. So would you
Yeah,
like to
yeah.
talk about that?
Yeah, I came to Leslie in the mid 90s. A longtime friend of mine who I'd met in Nepal, of all places, in 1982, was coming to Leslie's Darshans in Marin and told me about her. And I still remember the very first time I was there. I had my eyes closed, waiting for her to come into the room. And I saw, with my eyes closed, this wave of golden light pass in front of me. And I opened my eyes, and it was Leslie walking in front of me. And the rest is history on that. And of course, you were part of a big, huge part of that process as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
so we go back 30 years at least. Yeah.
long time, long time.
Yeah.
And yeah, from the early 90s. Uh, yeah, and that's not an uncommon story. I've heard so many stories from people about their experiences with Leslie in meditation, including my own. So we were very blessed to have her for the number of years we did.
Yes,
And
yes.
I'm so grateful that part of it is meeting so many wonderful people
Mm.
through Core Light, through the events that we did, including you. So
Yeah, yeah,
thank you
yeah.
again for joining us today, Stephanie. Let me speak a little bit about what we're going to do today because it's a departure from how the spiritual weather report normally works each month. Today, we're getting a great gift in that Stephanie is going to present some highlights from her annual astrology report, which she just completed and just offered to her group. And she does a very thorough report every year. So, for our purposes today, we'll be discussing just a few of the key points. However, I do recommend if this interests you, if you feel drawn to it, that you get the full report. I did, and I was really, really moved by everything that Stephanie said. I tend to do that every year, and I'm on Stephanie's list. I get her monthly reports. So before we go on, Stephanie, would you like to talk just a little bit about that and how people can get your annual report?
I selected about 10 of the 50 slides that I have in that yearly report. And at the very end, I have a listing of that. But every 2 weeks, just before each new and full moon, I write a general astrology forecast of what's coming up archetypally and how to work with that. And I like to illustrate it with my photos and quotes and resources that help people work with the energies more consciously so we can actually put up our sails, so to speak, and ride the winds of change. So that's every 2 weeks, my new and full moon forecast. And then once a year, I do what I call my yearly forecast, which I look at the major themes for the entire year. And again, how to work with those, so that we can thrive rather than just survive.
Ecoastrology.com. Okay, thank you so much. So before we get started, I want to welcome everybody who's new to Corelight and also welcome to all of our old friends. And whether you're listening live or in the future, it doesn't matter. We're all in a field of love and it exists in the eternal present moment, no matter what linear time you're tuning in. For those who are new every month, what I usually do is tune in on what's happening in the collective consciousness, and I'm always shown a few key themes to talk about on these calls. But this month is different. As I just said, Stephanie came up with the themes because it's based on her report, which she's going to share the highlights of with us, like a PowerPoint today. And so when Stephanie and I were preparing for today's call and I was listening to her report, I told her how amazed I was that all of what she's seeing for the year ahead dovetails so perfectly with what I'm feeling about the year ahead as well. And I think it speaks to the power of astrology. We all are in this energy, and the astrology is a very accurate way of reading what we can all feel. Do you want to chime in about that before we get started, Stephanie?
Yeah, and I it goes both ways. I'm reading through the lens of astrology, and I love when someone else says, "Yes, that's what I'm getting to energetically," because it really is a language of
Right.
energy, and a language of archetypes that we're all responding to, not always consciously, but always we're in this field. The word forecast is like the weather forecast, right? We know whether it's raining or whether the sun's out, but the choices we make in response to that are our own. So it is very much like that, a language of energy and a field of sacred geometry that we're working within.
Yes, thank you. Okay, without further ado, let me mention the six themes that Stephanie came up with for today. I've written them down
Did,
here.
did you want to do a little short meditation or not?
Yes, I'll mention the themes and then we're going to do a guided meditation. Then we'll go into Stephanie's presentation and then I'll speak a little bit about some of the things I'm seeing and I'll have we're going to keep this a little bit informal, like a dialogue. I'll probably have questions for Stephanie as we go along and then we'll have time at the end, as we always do, for some questions and answers. And also, we'll close today with a little prayer, pardon me, or a guided meditation, whatever we have time for. So, the first theme is evolutionary turning point. Second theme is major initiations. Third, moving from yin to yang. That's feminine to masculine. The fourth is balancing masculine and feminine. The fifth is power, coming into our spiritual maturity. And the sixth and final theme for today is collaboration. All right. So let us take a few moments to close our eyes and take a few long, slow, deep breaths. Just relaxing deeply with each exhale. Breathing in all the light and the life force that surrounds you. And breathing out any tension in the body. Breathing in peace and breathing out stress. Breathing in the present moment. Breathing out any worries about the past or the future. Breathing in joy and breathing out worry. And so I invite you now, as you continue to breathe, to do a full body muscular relaxation from scalp to toes and fingertips. So, like a leaf falling from a tree, just allow your energy to scan the body from head to toes, very gently, feeling any place where there might be tension, and just breathing light into those areas, and breathing out the tension. And special places to focus on include the eyes. So if you take a moment to just feel around your eyes, relaxing all the many tiny little muscles around the eyes, the eyelids, the eyeballs, just allowing the whole region of the eyes to let go and relax. Also the neck and shoulders. And the diaphragm is another place. Let's take a few long, slow breaths deep into the diaphragm. So breathing light in through the top of the head all the way down into your diaphragm, filling up your lungs, full, 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 stretching them just a little bit so that the diaphragm stretches and then relax and let go. Exhale. And let's do a few of those. Breathing light down into the diaphragm, filling up the lungs, full, full, full of light, stretching the diaphragm just a little bit, gently, and then letting go. And one more. Exhaling any tension in the diaphragm. Continuing to scan the body for tension in the muscles, scanning the pelvis and the legs, all the way down to the ankles, feet, and toes. Now I invite you to put your awareness on the crown chakra. And if you're new, the crown chakra sits on the top of the head like a crown that a king or a queen would wear. And it opens up and out like a funnel, Sometimes it's known as the thousand-petaled lotus because it opens up and out like a lotus. So just feel that crown chakra on the top of your head opening up and out like a thousand-petaled lotus. And as the crown chakra opens, and by the way, it's okay if this is new to you and you don't feel this, you can just visualize it and set the intention that one day you'd like to feel it, and you will. And so, as you feel and visualize the crown opening on top of the head like a thousand-petaled lotus flower, feel a beautiful, gentle, golden white light raining down from above like a mist. This is the energy of the divine, the heavenly energy, pouring down into your body. Allow it to fill up your whole aura and your physical body, filling you up from head to toes and fingertips. Feeling every cell of your body absorbing this beautiful golden white light. Trillions of cells like little miniature sponges soaking up this golden white light, filling up your body, filling you up all the way down your arms to your fingertips, filling up so much that the light starts to shoot out your fingertips, and filling up your torso and your legs all the way down to your toes. So much that the light starts to shoot out the tips of your toes. And now I invite you, as you continue to fill up, put your awareness on your root chakra. For those who are new, it's at the base of the spine, at the perineum. And just feel and visualize the root chakra. When you do put your awareness there, feel how that area just naturally relaxes. And the root opens, and you can drop your grounding cord down into the earth and ground this energy into Mother Earth. Feel her supporting you from beneath in the form of the floor and the chair. And just relax and let go into her embrace like a little baby in the arms of its mother, relaxing deeply, allowing Mother Earth to support you, feeling completely grounded, nourished, safe, relaxed. And feel the earth energy pouring up into you from beneath, with the soles of your feet, up into your body. So as you continue to relax and fill up from beneath and from above, I'm going to say a little prayer and an invocation for our call today. Great Spirit, Divine Mother, Father God, the self that we all are, we invite you in to this sacred space. We call on all of our highest guides and teachers and angels and all the beings who surround us in the highest love and support. Please wrap us up in a cocoon of beautiful golden white light and love. and healing energy fill us up and guide our conversation into the highest love and the highest wisdom. And hold our hands as we walk out into the world, into our soul's highest purpose. We're so deeply grateful for this opportunity to gather today in this field of love. And let's take this opportunity to share a prayer and a blessing for the earth, especially all the places on the earth where there is terrorism and war and genocide. We ask for special blessings to go out to all who suffer, especially in those areas, but anywhere, any life form that suffers in any way. We send a special prayer of healing and peace and blessing. And we give thanks for this gift of being incarnate in physical bodies, beautiful physical bodies at this extraordinary time on this beautiful planet at the great turning. This extraordinary opportunity to evolve and grow and to practice loving. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And now, when you feel ready, I invite you to slowly bring your awareness back into the room and into your body. Slowly begin to wiggle your fingers and toes. And when you feel ready, open your eyes and stretch. Ooh, yawn. Yawning is good. Help us relax, feel at peace. All right. Well, without further ado, Stephanie, once again, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. And I'd like to turn the microphone over to you. Please guide
Yeah.
us through your astrology for the visioning of 2026.
Thank you for that. I always feel very different after that kind of relaxation exercise. So, so what we're talking about here is something that many, many people have talked about throughout the ages. This evolutionary shifts. And before we get into the astrology, I think it's helpful to look at how many prophecies and visionaries have talked about this. Essentially, a dimensional shift from the third to the fourth chakra, from the power center, if you will, to the center where we know we are connected, where we feel our interconnectedness, where we feel equality and our unity with all life. And this has been called, this process of evolution has been called many different things. Desjardins called it Christogenesis. Arthur Young called it the reflexive universe. Barbara Marx Hubbard, the conscious evolution. Fritjof Capra, in his seminal book, The Turning Point. Terence McKenna named it Time Wave Zero, a singularity process. Greg Braden's New Human Story, and many, many, many others. Those are just a few that are perhaps some of the more well-known. And of course, our beloved Leslie. Um, she, many years ago, I think in the back in the early 90s, described how we were evolving into a new species, Homo luminous. A quote from her, a heart-centered consciousness which includes compassion, tolerance, and respect for others, as well as living in states of gratitude, generosity, joy, equanimity, surrender, and peace. And that was shared by the shaman and anthropologist Alberto Vivaldo. His quote being, We're evolving to become beings aware of divine light within. The psychiatrist David Hawkins, Homo spiritus, the awakened man who has bridged the evolutionary leap from physical to spiritual. Again, Barbara Marx Hubbard called it Homo universalis, where we're consciously creating together inside the energy of our oneness, driven by the most powerful force in the universe, love. Astrologer Barbara Hand Clow called it Homo Pacem, focused on peace. And another mystic, Michael Gurian, described it as Homo Infinins, for the unlimited human, not separate from animals or plants or the air we breathe, but part and parcel of it. So, the astrology, the astrological excuse, as I like to say, is that this is the beginning of the age of Aquarius. We've all probably heard that term many times. What does that mean? Not to get too technical, but there is something called the great year in astrology, a cycle that is about 26,000 years, a precessional cycle. If you divide that by 12, the 12 signs of the zodiac, you get about roughly 2,150 years. We have been in the age of Pisces, and we are now moving into this new age. Um, the exact date is open to a lot of debate. A researcher and famous astrologer, Nicholas Campion, in one of his books, describes 74 different dates ranging from the 15th century to almost 4000 AD, due to the fact that we're working with two different zodiacs and the astronomical constellations are not the same size. If you look up in the nighttime sky, you don't see any lines. You don't really see even demarcations for the zodiac. Those are things that we're imposing on these vast geometries. Um, but there is, I think, no doubt that we are in the dawning of the age of Aquarius, and there's some good indicators that we're very much at a turning point in 2026. We'll get to that very shortly. Along those lines, there's something called the galactic alignment, where the sun at the solstice, especially the winter solstice, aligns with the galactic center every almost 13,000 years, half of that cycle. John Major Jenkins found this kind of alignment discussed in many, many different cultures in ancient Egypt, in Vedic astrology, in the Celtic and Druid traditions, in the Kabbalah, and in Islamic cosmologies. A famous astronomer, Jean Meus, calculated this exact alignment actually occurred in May of 1998. And again, because we're looking at a huge cycle, a 26,000 year cycle, or at least half of that, if you give a 1 degree orb, which is a very small wiggle room, it began in 1962 and will complete in 2034. So we're going toward the end part of that. We're still receiving those powerful transmissions from our galactic center, those ongoing beams of radio waves, ultraviolet, gamma, X-rays that are affecting our DNA, our consciousness itself, our physiology, and the magnetic field of the Earth. So that too is supporting these evolutionary shifts. In Hindu cosmology, Bibhu Dev Misra, who wrote a book called The Yuga Shift, postulates that this precessional cycle corresponds with the Yuga cycle in Vedic mythology and cosmology. Um, uh, some sources say that those cycles are millions of years old. His argument, which he does with a great deal of research and eloquence on this link, if you're wanting to go further with that, we're at the end, and he says that 2025 was actually the end of the Kali Yuga, which began in 676 BCE. So another lens that is acknowledging this major shift. And of course, the Mayan calendar.
Stephanie, Stephanie,
Yes.
let me pause you for just 1 second, just for our listeners who might be listening and not seeing, or if somebody's looking and they're not able to get that link. My recommendation, my strong recommendation, is that people should get your report, your full report. It's not expensive, and it gives you all of this, their downloads, so you can have all this and so much more
Okay.
at
Yes. Thank you.
ecoastrology.com.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I'm looking at the slide here, so it's easy to.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So the Mayan calendar described, of a long count calendar, described almost a 14 billion year process, which corresponds with the scientific assessment of of the age of our universe, and that too relatively recently. 2012 is not that far back. Um, um, December 12th, 2021, that winter solstice was anchoring in and marking a whole new phase in humanity's evolution, a whole new level of consciousness and divine light and love. And then also from more indigenous teachings, the Central and South American teachings from the Quechua, the Shipibo, the Shuar, the Koji, have a prophecy called the eagle and the condor. The eagle representing the masculine, linear, left brain, industrial part of humanity, and the condor representing the feminine, the heart, and spiritual awareness. And those two streams coming together um, at this time or in the coming years, we can see that process dovetailing with these other prophecies. And then in the American Southwest, the Hopi prophecy that we are now in the end days of what they call the fourth world, and that the fifth world coming will be a time of lasting peace and harmony and regeneration, where all people speak one language and recognize the Great Spirit. Okay. So many, many different ways of looking at this. We're going to look now more through the astrological lens. Um, and some points that I think are helpful to keep in mind because there's many ways to work with astrology as a tool. And like any tool, it can be used with skill or it can be used to harm. So really, I think the best way to think of astrology is as a language of energy. It helps us remember who we really are, where we came from, where we're wanting to go. And it describes this beautiful sacred geometry of encoded light that is assisting our evolution. Um, it's like a kaleidoscope. If you ever had a kaleidoscope when you were a kid, you have the same pieces of colored light, and when you twist it, the patterns keep changing. And so the movement of the planets around the sun and the sun around the galactic center and our galaxy around other galaxies and other points in space, that is like a kaleidoscope, those pieces constantly shifting, those patterns constantly changing, but the same light being reconfigured and re-patterned. And astrology will train us to think in cycles, not just linear time. We're usually taught of past, present, and future, but as cycles in terms of spirals, especially. We're actually spiraling through space, and we're in a quadrant of space where we have never been before, and at a juncture in history where we've never been before. So, quite exciting time. Astrology reminds us how everything's connected and everything changing, right? The famous maxim, as above, below, so below. There's also a second part of that, as without, so within, or as within, so without, right? Very important. It gives us both a calendar and a cosmic clock. We forget that our daily calendar acknowledges astrology and astronomy. Monday is Moon Day. Tuesday was named for the French word for Mars. Wednesday was Woden's Day. In Norse mythology, it's Mercury. Thursday is Thor's Day, the Norse god equivalent to Jupiter. Friday was Freya's Day, the equivalent of Venus. Saturn Day is obviously Saturn's Day. And then Sunday is the most obvious. So our names for the days of the week, our moon, the monthly calendar comes from the cycle of the moon around the earth, and our yearly calendar comes from, of course, the earth orbiting around the sun. So astrology and astronomy, which were not really separate until a few hundred years ago, give us a mundane calendar time and also a sacred calendar time. The ancient Greeks had two words for it. Chronos, which we have many words in English, chronography, chronology, and so on, and kairos, which was a different quality of time, more divine timing, sacred time, what we might call synchronicity, where things happen not in a linear process, and which you could think of as the biblical reference to everything there is a season. So it helps us to be in time, on time, in tune, in the flow. And as I mentioned, cycles, very important to think about in terms of cycles and patterns and relationships. And so it offers a spiritual roadmap, a lesson plan, and it outlines, as Brad mentioned, potentials. We always, always have free will and always have choice. So what we're talking about really are transits. The word transit comes from the same cognate as transition and transformation, to go through, right? So these are power times, power turning points, crossroads, opportunities to grow, right? It's our karmic timetable. And essentially, the faster the planet moves, the briefer its cycle, and so the more transitory it is. The farther out from the sun a planet orbits, the longer its cycle, and the greater the field of consciousness that it holds. So we're going to talk today about some of the outer, what are called outer planets. And by those, I mean from Jupiter on out beyond that. Um, the moon goes around the Earth once a month. We go around the sun once a year. Venus and Mercury have a 1 year orbit around the sun. Mars, 2 years. Those are what are called inner planets. But going beyond that, Jupiter has a 12-year cycle, Saturn 29 years, and so on, going all the way past Eris, which has a cycle of over 555, 57 years. And there are bodies beyond that. Sedna has a 12-year cycle, and some beyond that. We're still adding to our solar system and our knowledge. We're always increasing. And as we make these new astronomical discoveries, and they're named for mythological figures, they coincide and mark new discoveries in consciousness. We're expanding our field of awareness as we discover a new planet. We're discovering new archetypes, or actually being able to um, react to them consciously. They're always there, but now more conscious of them. Mhm. So the themes for this year, as Brad already touched on, we're at this huge evolutionary turning point where we are releasing old beliefs. We are in a huge paradigm shift, moving from patriarchy and hierarchy to co-creation and collaboration, right, which has been prophesized in many, many different ways. And this is a huge initiation. And that's indicated in astrology by four of the five outer planets are moving into new signs. They dipped into it in 2025. Four of those five planets, outer planets, briefly went into new signs and then retrograded back into previous signs. So it was symbolic of kind of dipping into these new archetypes, but then going back and having to complete, release, re-examine and fully prepare to move forward, right? It's retrograde times are normal part of the cycle. There's a lot of fear sometimes about, oh no, Mercury is retrograde. Not a big deal. It's part of the cycle and an opportunity to review, reassess, and realign so that we can move fully forward when the planet goes direct. So when a planet is retrograde, it's turning our attention inward to reflect and make sure that there's no unfinished business, or to clear as much as we can so we can move forward with less baggage and fully embrace and make progress in this new archetype. Okay, so four of those five planets in 2025 dipped into new signs. In 2026, they move fully into new signs. And it also happens to be a number 1 year in numerology. So again, another framework acknowledging this big shift. Another big theme for 2026, as these planets shift signs, they shift elements. In astrology, there are four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. And there have been more of these planets than earth and water. Now in 2026, all of the outer planets will be either in fire or air, with the exception of Jupiter. For the first half of 2026 will still be in a water sign, but after July it goes into fire. So this is a big shift from yin receptive energy to the yang active energy. And that corresponds with the Chinese astrology of the year of the yang fire horse. 2026 being much more action oriented, independence, and movement, right? Essentially the yin signs are about inner development, the outer signs are about external development in a nutshell. So lots of energy, requiring that we stay extra centered and grounded. And along with that, balancing the masculine and feminine. Right? There are a number of indicators already in process. We've had Chiron and Eris in Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, which is a masculine sign, kind of the primary masculine energy, yang energy, and then Saturn and your Neptune are moving also into Aries. So lots of energy in Aries in 2026, in the first sign in the zodiac, reflecting initiations, but also the masculine. And especially looking at how we're using force, how we express our will, how we move through life, right? How we are active, yang versus receptive. So we're very much about defining the masculine, re-imaging our heroes, our examples, our exemplars of what it means to have a male body and to have a male side. Of course, no matter what our gender identification or physiology, we all have a masculine and feminine side. And as we balance that internally, everything changes in our life and helps ripple out into the world and change and stabilize the world. Okay, and then power, along with these shifts, the theme about power, again, that going back to that first sign in the zodiac, initiations, emergence, yang energy, how we move into life, how we make decisions, how we make our choices, and coming into our spiritual maturity with that, so that we are creating more consciously, responding rather than reacting, and trusting our inner guidance, looking and operating from an inward focus of an internalized sense of authority rather than looking outside of ourselves for permission or approval or the right thing to do or turning to experts. Not that we can't have help. One of the things about this year is definitely asking for help, but mostly more on the inner planes from our spiritual sources and our spiritual guides, whether they're in form or not. But really learning to trust ourselves and listen and owning our internal power. Right. And dealing with the fear as it comes up, because there's a lot of that. We'll talk about that very shortly. And then along those lines of collaboration, as we move into the heart, as we feel our interconnectedness and know our inseparability from source, we naturally, want to work and connect with other people. And this is indicated by Pluto's ongoing transit through Aquarius. Pluto dipped into Aquarius in 2023, retrograded back and forth in 2024, is now fully into Aquarius for the next 20 years or so. Plus the North Node, another indicator. We'll be moving into Aquarius after the end of July, accenting this shift of the turning of the ages, right, that we touched on. The age of Aquarius is essentially the age of equality, fraternity, and freedom. The freedom to be who we are, to be an individual and to belong, to be part of a larger whole, to recognize our humanity, our common humanity. I love how Steve Behrman, Swami Beyondinana puts it, to recognize that we're all special, just like everybody else. Right? To be who we are and to know that we are equal and all contributing to the whole, to be part of the puzzle, part of the solution. Okay, so those are the major themes, big, big pieces this year. We're just going to touch on one of those pieces. I think the most important thing of this coming year would be the coming together of two outer planets. Anytime that happens in history, those are major shifts. Um, the farther out the planet, the more major the shift. Neptune represents the edge of our solar system. It's the furthest planet right now. Pluto used to be, and then as we began discovering more bodies in around 2003, we discovered a number of bodies orbiting beyond Pluto that catalyzed a reclassification of what it means to be a planet. And those astronomical shifts also rippled into the astrology. So Neptune represents the bounds of this realm of experience. And symbolically, where we are developing a unitive consciousness, right? Where that includes, of course, compassion. When our heart is open, we feel compassion. We are in touch with our intuition. We are transcending, still in bodies, but also be able to transcend into metaphysical realities. So it's the realm of mysticism, altruism, where we access more fully our imagination, the collective unconscious, what we might call altered states. It's a very right brain energy. Neptune has a 168-year cycle, long time, right? So it spends about 14 years in each sign. If you divide that by 12, you get about 14 years. Like everything in astrology and in life, it has a shadow side. So the opposite of those things I just mentioned would be passivity. Rather than true surrender, we're giving up our power. We're going into escapism or addictions, or victimhood, martyrdom, codependency, ways that we do Neptune less consciously. Okay.
Stephanie, can I pause you for just a second for any
Yes.
listeners who may not be very familiar with astrology? Um, this includes me. Um, Tell us a little bit about this is Neptune in Aries, and I think what you're telling us is that this major planet, our farthest out planet, is moving into a new sign, which
Yes.
means as a collective and as individuals, we're going to be experiencing this major shift because the planet's not in, I think it was Pisces, is that right?
Yes.
Was it? So it moved from Pisces to Aries.
Yes.
Okay, and so you're going to talk about the what what that is and how that affects us, right?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
as so Neptune has been in Pisces, the previous sign, since 2011. And
Okay.
that was a time of helping us. Okay, so Neptune goes with Pisces, just another little piece of astrology. There are 12 signs in the zodiac. There are planets that correspond with each one of those signs. And so one of the ways to learn a lot of astrology very, very quickly and find a lot of meaning is to learn what I call, or what actually what Zip Dobbins called many years ago, the astrological alphabet. So essentially a cycle of 12 archetypes, 12 signs representing 12 archetypal stages of development. The first sign being the beginning, right? Emerging, just do it, just getting out, right? Going all the way to the 12th sign, which is Pisces, which is completion, transcendence, unity consciousness, right? With each one of those signs, there's a planet that corresponds with that archetype very closely. And Neptune very closely coincides with Pisces. So when it's in Pisces, it kind of doubles it. It intensifies that archetype. Right? It really bumps up the energy. And Neptune has been in Pisces, the sign that it rules, that it corresponds with, since 2011. So really supporting, increasing our multidimensional awareness, opening our heart, realizing and expressing our compassion and our intuition and so on, and the power of the heart, right? So we can reflect on, okay, what's happened for us? How far have we grown? How much have we grown in terms of our access and understanding of metaphysical reality and spirituality since 2011, right? That was just before 2012, right? So I hope I've come a long way, and I know many, many people have as well. So that's part of what Neptune and Pisces has been supporting and giving us huge tailwinds. Now in Aries, it is giving us tailwinds, and it has a dissolving quality. Each planet has a different flavor, a different color, a different way of affecting us. And so Neptune is like the ocean. If you think of the mythology of Neptune, if you know just a bit of Roman mythology or Greek mythology, you know a lot of astrology. The archetypes are based on that, those Greco-Roman archetypes. So Neptune is the god of the sea, right? And each one of us, you could think of us as a drop in the ocean, right? We're all drops in the cosmic ocean. And at one point, we might seem very separate, but put us back into the ocean, put that drop back in the ocean, there is no true separation. At another level, it's an illusion, right? We are part of this cosmic oneness. We all come from creation and go back, or are part of that process of ongoing creation, is better said. So Neptune is the god of the sea, right? And in Pisces, that ebb and flow, emergence and return to the source, indicative of that. In Aries, it's dissolving like the ocean dissolves the shore, like the water dissolves rock and structure. Neptune is dissolving our illusions and idealization of our misperceptions around the masculine, around all the things that Aries represents, competition, all the shadow sides too of colonization, the misuse of power, evolving from might makes right to being spiritual warriors, right? To come into the full maturity of Aries, which is the warrior who knows the true battle is within and is acting from a higher motivation, not from a personal ego point of view. That doesn't mean we don't have desires, that we can't have what we want, that we're losing our individuality, but that we are guided, we are motivated by a heart-centered process rather than a third chakra process, motivated by compassion and wisdom. So the themes for Neptune and Aries would be new ideals, new beliefs, certainly, new hero archetypes and saviors. It also affects, we'll see it in fashion and in art. We're already seeing that, new trends, um, and new ideologies, the rise of more socialistic points of view, um, more emphasis on personal power. Um, Unfortunately, maybe more also more the glorification of war. We've seen that in previous cycles. And Neptune is also about subtle realities, energy, things that are invisible. You may know or may not know, but I always find this very helpful to keep in mind that 95% of our universe is invisible to our five senses. Even our most sophisticated scientific instrumentation can only identify 5% of the universe. The rest of it is called dark matter and dark energy, which we really don't know that much about, right? We know it by inference, by gravitational effects, but we can't see or perceive 95% of the universe other than with our sixth sense, with our intuition, with our other kinds of intelligence, which Brad is going to talk about shortly, and which we're moving into. So recognizing and relying more and more on our sixth sense is a huge part of this process, with Neptune moving into Aries, and then in a number of other ways as well. Okay. The last time that Neptune was in Aries was the period of 1861 to 1875. And it was interesting in a quite striking synchronicity. The US Civil War began the day, right, the day of the Ingress, or very close to when it was
Let's let's
almost stood up.
pause on let's pause on that one for just a second because it doesn't it feel like there's a different kind of civil war going on, not just in the United States, but worldwide, this
Yeah.
divide, this separation. So that's a fascinating example you just gave.
Yes, yes, yes. It's polarization
There you
that's been
go.
increasingly, um, actually supported, unfortunately. So yes, that doesn't mean we're going to have another civil war or that the United States will
Right,
break up again, but that there was this similar tension between competing ideologies, beliefs. Slavery is
right,
good, slavery is bad, right? So
right.
during that period, of course, was the abolitionist movement, and unfortunately, immediately after that, the beginning of the KKK, the reaction to that. The U.S. Homestead Act well, increased colonization and genocide, unfortunately, but opened up, the frontier that, cleared the native peoples away and, spread its manifest destiny. So that's Aries also, emerging, will, discovery, pioneering. That's Aries energy as well, just moving out into what is for some people unknown territory. This was also coincident with some interesting developments with the first color photograph and moving pictures, and that's another good metaphor for Neptune and Pisces. This dovetails with our teachings in Chlorite of being the witness. I like to describe Neptune as being in a movie theater where you're watching a film. You can get very involved. A good film can make you laugh and cry and get angry and raise all kinds of emotions, but some part of you is aware that you're in a movie, that you're watching a play, watching that scene. So Neptune is that quality of conscious. It's the witness consciousness where we're able to watch and participate, have that dual awareness. And photographs can do the same thing as movies can do the same things, but hopefully we are always aware, or as much as we can, in our witness of watching these different frames and different images moving through our field of awareness. But that was the beginning of this the discovery of photography. And and
Stephanie, can I ask you a question here? Do you feel like, since you're saying that Neptune represents maybe an amplified witness, do you
yes.
feel like is that going to be one of the things that people can look forward to as perhaps an easier time with practicing witnessing?
Yes, I would think so. Yes, these
Okay.
are like tailwinds, transformational tailwinds that support developing and going in this direction. If we go in this direction, if we raise our sails, if we take the time to do the work, then we have huge support for it. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you.
And
For anybody who might be new to these calls, witnessing is something we talk about almost every month because it's really at the heart, at the core of the path of spiritual awakening. And Leslie and I wrote a book called The Marriage of Spirit, and there's a whole chapter in that book on witnessing. The Marriage of Spirit's available anywhere, including on our website. But if this interests you and you're new and you want to know about witnessing, that's a place to find out more about it. But I think Steph, your image that you've given of being in a movie theater and having some part of you being the objective observer in the background all the time, knowing that you're watching a movie despite the emotions moving through you, that's really such a great example of the witness.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. We are the actors. We are the producers. We are the script writers. We're
Director,
the directors. Yes, all parts of that. Yeah,
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 and the
yeah.
audience too.
And the audience. Yes, 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 yes. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And there was one other piece I wanted to mention that just kind of flitted through. Oh, yes. The planets are like spotlights. And so they will show us where we are. So there's nothing automatic here. So Neptune moving into Aries is a spotlight on how we're using Aries. So wherever we are in that continuum from being, kind of a caveman, might versus right, to a spiritual warrior, it will show us where we are and shine a light, encouraging us to move toward the spiritual warrior. But nothing is automatic. We still have to raise our sails and catch that wind, right? Right. So, okay. So, a couple other things that happened during that period that correspond with this archetype. Things that were more collectively oriented. The first trade union initiated or begun in Britain. Karl Marx's Das Kapital was published during this time, a huge and a very important work. At the establishment of the Red Cross in Switzerland and the Salvation Army in the US, and the Theosophical Society, which honors all traditions, a new spiritual, I would say belief system, but a new spiritual organization. So during this time with Neptune and Aries, we may see new forms of religion or collective ways of looking at religion because Neptune rules our faith and trust in something greater than ourselves, a rise of spiritualism. People were doing seances at that time or beginning to get it more interested in connecting with um, metaphysical realities. So those are some of the themes from that period that may be cycling around or are cycling around for this
Well,
time period.
can I just note something? It's interesting. A lot of those last things that you mentioned, um, have to do with socialism, which, in I'm not advocating for any type of ism, but I'm just saying that that's so much about wanting to care for everybody, want to include everybody, wanting to make sure everybody's, cared for. And then you've got Red Cross, which is similar, Salvation Army, similar. And this Theosophical Society and spiritualism is very much about an all-encompassing spirituality where everyone has their own inner divinity. So isn't that interesting that that was the effect then? Because that's you see right now the first socialist mayor of New York has been
Mhm.
elected. And other trends like that. So I don't know. I'm not advocating, I'm not saying anything's good or bad. By the way, that's not what this is about. But I'm just saying it's interesting to see where, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Absolutely. And hopefully it will become more inclusive, more altruistic, more encompassing of all, rather than just for the few. We definitely need to go in that direction.
Right, right.
Right. Yeah. So not only is Neptune moving into Aries, but Saturn is moving into Aries. Okay. And Saturn is a very different archetype. Right. It has a much shorter orbit, still very long, 29 and a half years. You may have heard of the Saturn return if you have been exposed to astrology, and that simply means that we're at the end of our 20s, and Saturn has returned, come back in the zodiac to where it was when we were born. Okay, if every 12 years we get a Jupiter return, if we live to 50, we get a Chiron return. If we make 84, we get a Uranus return, right? So a return simply means we're coming back. We've made one complete orbit or phase. And it represents the bounds of our physical reality, right? Until a couple of hundred years ago, Saturn was the farthest planet that we knew of. It was the farthest planet we could see with the naked eye. Uranus, beyond Saturn, was discovered with a telescope, and Neptune also. So Saturn represents the 3D, you could say, the bounds of physical time and space. And by metaphor, where we are redefining rules and roles and responsibilities, our consensus reality, what we see as, you know, physical time and space. It stays in a sign for about 2.5 years, and its shadow side can be a very harsh inner critic. This is more indicative of our superego, right? The shoulds that we carry from our programming from childhood and education and our religious background and our cultural conditioning and our nationality and all the different and the media pressure. Of course, and you talk a lot about this in your teachings, Brad, about how we are programmed in many, many ways to have an identity and an ego. And we need that to some degree, but then we identify with it. And so Saturn is that process of becoming functional in society, um, which is a good thing. That like everything else, the high road of Saturn is to be mature and responsible and conscious of our choices. To know that our choices have consequences. Um, the shadow side of Saturn is to also give away our power, to give away our authority, right? To just go to have blind conformity, to just go along with what everyone else is doing because either we're afraid not to, or we don't know any better, or for any number of reasons. Um, so really, a part of this, like we see with Neptune, is again the theme about power, owning our power and truth, looking inside for our answers. Again, not that we can't have help or support from the outside, but the final choice coming from how it feels in our heart. Right. So
Can I
it,
ask you a question about that, Stephanie?
please, yes.
Well, to me, as you said, so much of what I focus on, it seems to me like one of the main themes that comes up frequently, it's there for all of us right now, is our sovereignty, taking our own power back, not projecting it out onto the outside as a savior or, wanting to be rescued. And
Yes,
so the
yes.
abdication of power and blind conformity has been such a shadow over the past several years around the world, that I guess I just wonder if you could speak a little bit about what you're seeing here around this aspect. It feels like this is something that we need to witness, you know, we need to amplify our witness around these things. So what are you seeing about Saturn in Aries? Sorry if I'm preempting you. Are you going to get to this, or can you talk
Uh,
about that now?
See if I understand your question. Um, in 2020, Saturn was conjunct two other planets, Jupiter and Pluto. That's why 2020 was such a pivotal year. And it was in the sign that Saturn goes with, Capricorn. So 2020 was a huge turning point, or was trying to be a huge turning point about power and authority and rules and regulations and conformity and all the things that Saturn represents. Pluto being much farther out, transformation of that. Jupiter being a lot about our beliefs and our assumptions. So in 2020, we had a huge initiation and huge, this is a whole nother topic we could talk about a lot, but there was, of course, it was a huge testing, I would say, of our capacity to determine what are we going to believe in Jupiter, what rules are we going to follow in Saturn, and who's really in charge, Pluto.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah,
To
that's
put it in a nutshell,
yeah.
right? And we can talk about 2020 a lot, but just to so in Aries, Saturn is still about consensus reality, but now it's wanting to move us into a new consensus reality, a new
Okay.
forms, new ways of looking at reality, one that is fresh, that is like another metaphor. If people are familiar with the tarot, the first sign of the zodiac is very much like the Fool card in the tarot, the image of someone holding a little, like a little bag, stepping into the unknown, right? So Yeah, Aries is the first sign. It is stepping into something new. And so Saturn in Aries is inviting us to create a new consensus reality that is not predicated on the shadow side of Saturn.
Okay, so let me just see if I can summarize for myself.
Mm.
Maybe this will help anybody else who's thinking like I am. So, are you saying that maybe um, the amplified witness aspect that we're going to be getting will help us to witness even more strongly the shadow side of this, which is blind conformity and abdication of power. So perhaps we will be more we'll have a strong witness and more capacity to observe these things playing out.
Yes, yes, it supports that
Okay.
development, right?
Okay.
Developing that
Perfect.
stronger witness. It's supporting building new forms and foundations for
Okay.
ourselves, for the collective, encouraging us to take calculated risks. Aries is ruled by Mars, right? So it's about initiative, about action, um, and courage, right? So developing resilience, and redefining, the masculine archetype. Um, Learning that strength comes from more self-discipline, rather than just because we've got, more nukes, whatever, or muscles. Um, it's about commitment, appropriate commitment. What are we committed to? What are we willing to work on? Saturn is about effort. Um, the image for Saturn in mythology is the reaper, right? So what we put in, we get back. What we sow, we reap. What we put energy into, we will manifest. So being very clear about consequences, about where our energy goes, right? What we're wanting to manifest, how we use our will, and how we deal with anger and conflict when necessary, because that too is about Aries. Having the courage to take a stand when necessary, to stand in truth, to stand in love, right? To own our power, to be responsible for our choices. And then also by corollary, how we deal with fear, right? When we can't move forward, when we're upset, when we're frustrated, when we're angry, what do we do with that? When we are in fear, how do we manage that energy? So Saturn is about doing it responsibly, doing it not to suppress it, not to project it, but to work with it consciously, right? Recognizing our limits also is Saturn, appropriate limits, not too much, not too little, right? Not the Atlas complex, but not to be irresponsible, right? And knowing, I think most of all, which battles to fight, where to put our energy, what's a wise use of our time and energy. That's Saturn. Saturn is about, again, um, where we, what we commit to, what we're putting our time, energy, and resources into. So which battles to fight and which ones to delegate or say, not my circus, not my monkey. Is that the beautiful Polish phrase, right? Yeah. Okay. So Saturn was last in Aries, in 1996 to 1999, roughly. And during that period, we saw the Mount Everest disaster, the first big Mount Everest disaster. Unfortunately, there's been some since then, where I believe about 10 or 12 climbers died because people were allowed to climb the mountains because they had the money to. If you had $60,000 in some training, you could get a permit, and people were taken up on that mountain who did not have the experience necessary for that strenuous task, even though there are fixed ropes and trained guides and a number of other things that support that process. So, because of bad weather, a number of people died, and several guides died, sacrificed their lives to try to save some of their clients. So again, about responsibility, and there was a lot of discussion after that of how do we restructure this? How do we determine who gets to climb Mount Everest? Is it just because you can afford it, or do you have put in the time and have the capacity to do that safely, so you're not endangering other people and the lives of the Sherpas who also have died helping people climb that mountain. So responsibility was a huge issue around that. Uh, During that time, is the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was elected. So it's now one cycle later. So he's completing one cycle, and that's often, not often, but always a time of either finishing something or going to the next level. If you can't If you can't go to the next level, then when we're finished and move on to something else. So something around the Israeli crisis will be happening with Saturn and Aries. During that time, The Hague issued arrest warrants for Bosnian war criminals. Another dictator came called into account. The former Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet was arrested, and in New Zealand, that country agreed to pay restitution to their Maori population for the loss of the land that was taken from them in the 19th century. And in the United Kingdom, they relinquished Hong Kong to China, signaling another shift in another power shift and decolonization. And that was the time of the Protocol, also looking at who is responsible for climate change and what are we going to do about it? Again, accountability, maturity, recognizing the consequences of our choices, that we can't keep polluting the earth without repercussions. Yeah.
So, question for you. So, this is the question is based in what I've been tuning into for the year ahead, or maybe even 2 years or whatever. But it feels to me like major shifts in um, political power, maybe even earth changes. I don't know, but it just feels like chess pieces are on the move. They're either going to be people in power stepping down, new people coming in, power changing hands around different countries. It's like a big moving and shifting of all that kind of stuff. Is that what you're seeing here?
Yes, thank you. Absolutely. Because this is not only, they're not only changing signs, they're going from the end of the zodiac to the beginning of the zodiac. So
Oh,
yes,
okay.
big
Okay.
shifts. Yes, thank you. And even more
Okay.
so, you're kind of anticipating the next piece. So they're together. Okay,
Uh,
so one outer planet moving into Aries, second one at the beginning of the zodiac, and they are conjuncting at the very beginning of the first sign of the zodiac. This has not happened for the last almost 7,000 years, and in the
wow.
last 14,000 years has only happened twice.
Wow.
So that's pretty amazing. So many
Yeah.
things saying the same thing, that this is a huge shift, a huge new beginning, and the emergence of a new paradigm, a new way of looking at power and force and the masculine, all those things that we've touched on. So yes, the last time this happened was um, 11,894 BC.
Where
Remember
were
that
we
time?
then?
Remember that time?
What was I doing then?
That's
Hmm.
right, right. Yeah.
So there's something else that came up. I just want to insert here. Oh, it left my mind. Something about what you just said. Oh, I know. It's sort of like the feeling I have is sort of like this is the time where the rubber meets the road.
Yes.
It feels to me like for so many years, decades, we've been feeling the energy and preparing, and we can feel the tectonic plates sort of trying to shift, and the energy, like the roots growing beneath the surface, and the things happening energetically. But it's almost like what's coming now in the next year or so, maybe a couple years, maybe 3 years, but it just feels like what's coming now is we're actually starting to see the physical movement, the physical changes. Is that kind of what you're seeing here with this?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Yay. This is
Yeah.
exciting news.
This is very exciting. Yeah. And this is the turning point. I've been like, feeling energetically like 2025 was like the nadir, the bottom, and now we're beginning the curve back up. And again, these are
Okay.
long cycles, so it's not going to happen overnight. It's not like
Right.
they're conjunct exactly in February 20th, at the very
Okay.
first degree of Aries. But again, we're talking about a long cycle. And so it's like
Okay.
spring. Spring doesn't happen on March 21st overnight, right? It starts happening a few weeks before. The days get longer, like it's brighter. So yes, very encouraging. And also, again, keeping in mind that this is a cycle, a very long cycle. So this is a turning point, and we're moving back up, I think, in 2026. So when we put the two together, Saturn physical reality, Neptune metaphysical reality, Aries new beginnings, the themes about these two competing ideologies, because Saturn and Neptune rule very different realities, right? Saturn is more about scientific observation. Neptune is about spirit. Nothing, I mean, again, these are wanting to be blended more thoroughly. So we're already seeing science validate, what we already know from mystical traditions for thousands of years, more and more confirmation coming in that way. Moving from just pure reductionism to more holism, to seeing how things are interconnected, right? Blending realism with idealism, knowing what we can change, what we can't change. Moving from more privatization of our resources to deep ecology understanding of, we can't just keep extracting as what we take affects the whole system, right? Looking at boundaries versus unity consciousness, the known versus the ineffable, classical physics and quantum mechanics, how they are really inseparable, but just dealing with different dimensions, um, blending reliance on outer facts and input with our inner guidance, um, and shifts in consensus reality, moving toward a more mystical and unitive understanding. So, in a nutshell, I like the phrase that Richard Tarnas is an amazing philosopher and astrologer who wrote a book called Cosmos and Psyche, tracking these cycles for several thousand years. And he came up with the phrase of an more enchanted reality, that we're wanting to re-enchant the universe, that we have, through the scientific revolution, um, lost connection with this holistic perspective, this spiritual perspective, and reduce the earth to just monetary resources that we can extract at will. So remembering our interconnectedness, coming back to, again, our awareness and living from a heart-centered consciousness is the major theme that's going to play out in these different ways. So, like you touched on, we are dissolving and redefining borders, institutions of all kinds, empires, right? Replacing cultural, social, or societal structures, which will play out in major shifts in power and authority. And because it's an Aries, a crisis of masculinity and identity, right? Aries being the first sign is, who am I? What makes me me? What do I identify with, right? And a further, this has already been happening, but a dissolution of traditional male roles as artificial intelligence takes over more and more jobs, self-driving cars and trucks and assistants and so on. Um, how is that going to change our identity? Because many of us identify with ourselves through our careers. The first question we often ask someone when we meet them is, what do you do? Meaning, what is your career? What is your work? Right? So huge shifts in identity, which on all level, from personal to national. And then with those, often we've already seen issues around migration and immigration. Who is an American? Who is, a citizen? Is it based on where they're born, or is it something different? Right? So looking at what does it mean to be an American, a citizen, any kind of identity. And the process, I think, will include, because again, we're in a transitional process. It's not going to happen overnight. So there has to be a dissolving before a reforming, right? We have to let go of the old to move into the new. So a dissolving of the old archetypes, the old ideals, possibly some dark nights of the soul, depending on how much we have been fixed in the old paradigm. A testing of the integrity of the existing systems, and then reshaping them or guiding them more toward more sustainable, more equitable, more unitive models, and the viability of all of that. Is it working? Is it not? It's, the cracks in the foundations are going to be unmistakable and undeniable. And this greater awareness of subtle realities and beings, from nature spirits to life on other planets and star systems, to the more formerly woo-woo becoming mainstream. We've seen a lot of that already happening. But definitely much more. And I think you're going to touch on this with the four intelligences. This is part of that, of how do we know what we know? That there are many ways of knowing, just not just through our left brain, but through other forms of perception.
Yeah,
So,
if we have time at the end, there are a few things I'd like to touch on, and if not, I'll carry it over to next month's spiritual weather report. But this is so rich. Like I I'm totally totally happy to just have you keep going. This is
mhm.
great. It's very
Okay, great.
exciting.
Okay. So always helpful to think about what happened the last time. So the last time they were conjunct was in 1989. It was in Capricorn, not the same sign. And it was amplified a couple of years later by another conjunction of Uranus and Neptune. So it's not, I don't think, going to be potentially, it could be, but it was definitely more like 2020 where there were three planets involved. But technically in 1989, Saturn and Neptune were conjunct in Capricorn, the sign that Saturn rules. So again, structure, form, consensus, reality. Um, During this time, this was the beginning of the World Wide Web, which changed the world. I mean, we can't even, those of us that are a little older can remember, pre-cell phone times, pre-web times, but it's almost like the dark ages now, right? We can't imagine functioning without the internet or cell phones right now, right? But that was only a little over 30 years ago, right? 33 years ago. So that was huge. The launch of GPS, which changed everything also, right? Um, and huge regime changes, the fall of the Soviet Union, the fall of the Berlin Wall, Soviets pulling out of Afghanistan, that beautiful, the Velvet Revolution and the singing revolutions in Estonia, where millions of people gathered to sing the folk songs, to defy the might of the Soviet Union and claim their independence peacefully. I still get chills thinking about that. And then, kind of setting the stage for a ripple effect. So it was the collapse of the Soviet Empire, right? And then the liberation of many of its satellites, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, Romania, India also made huge steps or regime changes. The UK as well, Japan, the Philippines, Jamaica, Ethiopia, Gambia, Namibia, Senegal, Colombia, Panama, Paraguay, Uruguay, all regime changes in those countries. So huge domino effects that year. Saturn formed boundaries, institutions, Neptune dissolving, all right, reforming, spiritualizing, hopefully. Right. Also, and the shadow side of that, unfortunately, was Tiananmen Square in China and martial law being imposed in Tibet. Right. That's the shadow side of Saturn is conformity, domination, heavy-handedness, no um, no mercy in a sense. Right.
And I'd like to add one to your list. It
Yeah.
was 1990. Does that count?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
not, 1990 was the year Nelson Mandela was released from prison at Robben Island.
Yes. Yes. Very important. And then, of course, the ending of the apartheid in South Africa shortly after
It
that.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was really the death knell to apartheid was
Yeah.
that when
Yes. Yes.
they wouldn't have released him unless they knew that there was a path out of apartheid and out of that government.
hmm hmm Yes, yes, that would be part of that whole phase of 89 through 93 when Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus were relatively close together within 10 degrees. So they were pretty much inseparable, but they weren't technically all conjunct, but they were very close. And so that amplified the tailwinds. Yes, yeah. And during that period also, shifts in economics. That was the first big bailout, of the savings and loan industry, a huge oil spill in Alaska, the Exxon Valdez. And then one of a big power grid collapse due to a solar flare that affected 6 million people. The Hydro-Quebec 9-hour power grid collapse happened during that time. So yes, something to keep in mind that not that these things will of course happen exactly, they can't. But again, the themes of big shifts in power, shifts in how we respond to environmental tragedies. The last time the Neptune-Uranus conjunction happened, that was a longer cycle. Saturn and Neptune come together every 36 years. Neptune and Uranus 172 years, so much more rare and powerful. And that was in 1821. the Greek independence from the Ottoman Empire, where they had been under the Ottomans for over 450 years or so. Mexico got their independence from Spain, along with Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica. So also a number of big shifts in power and decolonization happening during that time.
Wow. Wow. Isn't that amazing? That's exactly what we were saying. This is
Yeah.
shit. The tectonic plates are shifting
Yes, the plates of power and
geopolitically. Yeah.
geopolitically. Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the piece about Aries, and it's important to flesh that out a little bit more because Aries is a fire sign. It's the first sign. I know it's about action. There are three fire signs, three earth signs, three water, and three air signs. The first is personal. The second is interpersonal. And the third is collective or transpersonal. So Aries being the first fire sign is personal fire, personal will, personal power. The second would be Leo, creativity, interpersonal. How does my creation land? How do I express that? How does that affect other people? And then Sagittarius is the third or collective. How do I participate in a larger whole? How do my actions shape my beliefs and my world and reality itself? So this first sign is very critical because of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And just as an aside, then I talk about this more in my full forecast. Chiron and Eris, Chiron as the archetype of the wounded healer, essentially, and Eris as the archetype of the feminine who has been disregarded mythologically and archetypally and in human history, have been in Aries. And they conjuncted twice last year, and they have one more conjunction this year. So those two bodies are in Aries. Saturn and Neptune are now moving into Aries. So more support, more impetus to move into these higher states, hopefully, but also more fire, more energy. So making it even more important to stay grounded and centered, again, to respond rather than react, right? So it's challenging because this activates our root chakra, our first chakra, which is survival, fear, anger, and will, right? Um, and so the wounded masculine dominates and destroys. When we're in fear, we're literally out of our mind. We're in our limbic system, we're in our lower reptilian brain. We can't access our cortex when we're flooded with fear and adrenaline in our body. It's amazing how that shifts our consciousness immediately until we can get back into our rational frontal cortex. So again, making it really important to notice, and do what we can to get back to being in that part of our witness. So um, ways to deal with that we can always do immediately wherever we are is to slow and deepen our breathing. I'm sure you've talked about this many times, so I'll just cover it really quickly. That puts us back from our sympathetic nervous system into our parasympathetic nervous system, which does all kinds of wonderful things. It relaxes the body, it de-stresses us, it makes us more conscious, less insane, and it helps our body repair itself. When we're in sympathetic mode, we're in stress mode, and all our energy and resources are going into fight and flight, and fear. When we're in our parasympathetic nervous system, that's where healing occurs, and that's where our body restores itself. So if we're in constant stress, no wonder we have inflammation and chronic disease because our body has no time and resources to heal. So really important to stay in that parasympathetic zone. And we do it by simply slowing and deepening our breath. That's not all, but that certainly helps shift pretty much immediately. When I catch myself going into that state of parasympathetic overdrive, if I can, I ask for help. I ask for my guides, my angels, whatever your higher power is, your spiritual team, ask for help, pray, for what you need, for courage, for peace, for compassion, whatever that is. Remember, we're part of this huge evolutionary process, right? Years ago, when I was going through a major Pluto transit, I had a good friend who was also going through a similar transit. And I asked her, we made this little pact that if we ever got really overwhelmed, that we could call each other at any time of the day or night and say, okay, tell me again three things. You're not crazy, you're not flunking, and this too shall pass. You're not going
That's
crazy.
great.
You're not a spiritual flunky. Just because you're dealing with this again doesn't mean you're flunked. And this too shall pass. Okay, okay, okay. You might have three other things that are more relevant now, but that really helped bring me back to my witness. Whatever works, whatever works. Yeah. And a
That's great.
really, really crucial one is reducing our exposure to mass media. I used to be an NPR junkie. I used to have always, we used to subscribe to all kinds of and watch, the mass media like everyone does. But ever since 2020, especially, there's been increasing what you might call fear porn. If it bleeds, it leads. There's been studies, unfortunately, that show that we pay more attention to news that's traumatic than good news. There have been studies trying to have news stations with just good news. They don't make any money. We are living in space age times in caveman bodies. Our bodies are wired to be vigilant, to notice danger. And unfortunately, that makes money. And our attention is you could say, the new oil. So where we put our attention is so crucial. Major media right now is captured by a handful of organizations who do not always have our best interest at heart, to put it mildly. Um, I find it much less impactful to read news rather than to watch or listen to the news because those watching and listening, goes in more deeply into the right brain. So if you need to, you can, and Brad, I think is going to mention some good sources. I'm on several newsletters. I read them, the BBC, which is a little less biased than American news sources. Um, and um,
Let, is
you
this a
want to
good
go ahead
time
and
for
jump
me
in?
to?
Yes. Yes, why don't
Yeah,
you jump in?
I should probably just share. I've shared this in a past spiritual weather report, but I got hold of I learned about a service called Ground Dot News, and I've really enjoyed it. It's Ground Dot News recognizes that there's one set of facts, but all these different spins depending on which corporation controls, whether it's left leaning or right leaning or whatever that means these days. Who knows? It's all over the map. But basically, what Ground.News does for you is it gives you many different versions of the article. Say, here's what the left headlines are, here's what the right headlines are, here's what the center headlines are, and it'll give you percentages of where the blind spots are. This news story is only being given to, 10% of it's on the left, 90% of it's on the right, or whatever. And so it shows you who's missing what news, who's getting what news, how it's being spun. And I find that very helpful just to keep a better witness. Like, what are the facts? What's the truth? And how's it being spun? What do they want, whoever they are, what do they want us to believe? So I find that helpful. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And
Was
that's
there
a
some?
great. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And one other addition to that is to remember that what we hear on any major media, whatever its bias, is only a tiny fraction of what's happening on the earth. We're not hearing
Right.
about all the good things that are happening. There are several good news
Right.
subscriptions and if anyone wants those resources, email me or I can send them to you and you can send them out. But there are things that are happening, inventions that are going to be life-changing. People doing good things every day on the planet coming up with amazing, heart-centered things. We don't hear that on the major media. So just remember that that's a tiny, tiny fraction of what's happening.
Yeah.
Very, very biased and curated one.
No, I agree. Yeah. And the other thing I often say on these weather reports is to search out independent journalists who are not funded by corporations.
Right, right.
People who we all have to use our discernment. It's part of what you're talking about tonight, Stephanie, is that,
Absolutely.
this is what we're being called to, is our witness and our discernment.
Yes,
And who can you trust?
yes,
And, my discernment and my research has shown me that there are only a handful of people who are really, truly not beholden to corporations and who are searching for truth. So I look for those journalists.
yes, yes, absolutely. Discernment is another key word that we could certainly include in this. Yes, yes, absolutely. And to always come back to our inner guidance, what feels right in our heart. If we're not sure, there was that phrase, follow the science, but also follow the money. Who you can think about, okay, who's to profit from this,
Yep.
if you're not sure. But bottom line is coming back to what it feels like. Does this empower me or does this put me into fear? If it puts me into fear, I'm going to kind of question that. Why is someone telling me this? What's the motivation for this? And what can I do about it? So when I hear about a tragedy, when I know about suffering, I try to go into prayer rather than worry or fear. So if not to be an ostrich, not to stick my head in the sand, I'm not saying to ignore what's happening in the world, but to be very discerning, like you said, and to be empowered by that information. Okay, can I send blessings? Can I send prayer? Do I want to do something physically to help? To tune in and see what's the Dharma here? What is my heart called to do that? To know that I can always respond to whatever's happening consciously rather than just, get paralyzed and controlled by fear. So
Yes.
great.
Thank
Okay.
you. That's very well said. Thank you so much,
Okay,
Stephanie.
great. Okay, so actually we're kind of already segueing into this, right? So making friends with Neptune, making friends with the witness, with not knowing, with not judging, being able to see what's going on, to know that it's Layla, part of the divine, part of the play. It's part of humanity working out its stuff in a very, very messy way. Another wonderful metaphor is if you've ever remodeled, a house, as you're knocking out the walls and, changing things, it's initially way messier until the new stuff gets put in. So we are knocking out major institutions, major structures in consciousness, and it's messy. The transition is very messy until the new ones start to take hold, right? And the more that we've cleared internally, the more quickly we move into the new forms and that inner peace and compassion in your conscious. So we're all in transition. And so to give ourselves a break and give everyone a break, that we're all in this together and we're all doing the best we can with what we have at the time. All right, that's Neptune. Listening to our inner guidance, we just talked about that. Using, our heart as our GPS. If we're not comfortable with something, investigate further. What's wrong here? What am I missing? What do I need to say? What do I need to do? Really explore that. What do I need to process? Right? So not to override, those messages that we're getting from our body, from our heart, and from other intelligences, right? Other sources. You just mentioned discernment, being mindful of where we place our attention, time, and energy. And being in nature, what we can do to counterbalance that, so important to be in nature as much as we can and want to be in joy as much as we can, and gratitude. That's a fabulous practice to shift out of fear into gratitude, to find, that there's that metaphor of there's a pony in here somewhere, shoveling out a stable of you know, uh, of manure and going, okay, there's a pony in here somewhere, right? Making lemonade out of lemons, right? Making lemonade out of what's that? What making lemonade out of lemons, right? So being in gratitude, joy, and nature as much as we can, minimizing our exposure. We just talked about praying and blessing instead of worrying. I love this quote from Sandra Ingerman: "What you are thinking, you are praying for." That's pretty powerful. What we are thinking, we are praying for. And this takes us back to quantum mechanics, right? The observer affects the observed, right? Where our attention goes, energy follows and manifestation follows. These are metaphysical principles, but these are also quantum physics principles, right? We create, not to be oversimplified that we create a reality, but we co-create reality together. So being very discerning and mindful. Remembering we are not alone. There are many, many, many light workers and many, many countless beings assisting our evolution. Right? So to call on them, they are on standby 24/7. We have to ask and then listen and take up, and then do it. That's our choice. They will not, our spiritual guides, the good, if they are true guides, they will not interfere, but they will respond to requests for help and they will do what they can without taking away our free will. Because that's part of the game here on planet Earth is learning about free will, right? Right. And then last, but should I sing my little song? Thank you.
Please. I love your
I did this
voice.
at the end of my forecast. I learned this last year from a wonderful man named Lawrence Cole, who is a song master. He creates these little chants that are always uplifting and empowering. It's very simple. It's only one line, and it's become a mantra for me. You know the only question that exists is will we be the light? You know the only question that exists is will we be the light? And that to me encapsulates the challenge of this year and these times is coming back to the witness, to our discernment, to our heart, and choosing to be the light, to be part of the solution rather than the problem, to keep coming back to our center. Okay, that's
Beautiful.
I think the highlight that as best as I can do it in a few minutes. We have another 20 minutes. If I can just do a little promotional plug here. Um,
Please.
so every 2 weeks, like I mentioned before, I do a full forecast around each new and full moon that describes the current shifts, what they're symbolizing, how to work with them. That's available by subscription. It's on a sliding scale. If you sincerely can't afford it, let me know and I will send it to you gratis. I will also do that for the yearly forecast. I also have a 2-hour presentation on Neptune alone that I think is very helpful, looking at that from an astrological lens, but also how to work with that consciously. Another one on relationship, which is also about balancing the masculine and feminine. Those are available on my website as well. I have an ebook that's a summary of all the classes I've taught. I teach astrology one-on-one if you're interested in learning that, and I do readings as well. And I'll be teaching a workshop on Orcas Island, a magical place here in Washington State near Seattle in May. And if you're interested in that, you can either contact Indralaya or me for more information on that. Okay.
And please give your website and email address one more time.
Oh, okay. So it's Eco Astrology, ECO, and the word astrology.com. And that's my email address, also Stephanie with a PH at ecoastrology.com.
Great. Just for any listeners in case they're not seeing this. Wow. Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was just really, really special. I'm so grateful to you for showing up today.
Good. Thank you. I hope it's mostly in English, as much as best as I can do in English. No jargon or a little bit jargon.
We had a couple of questions. We've got enough time to do a couple of questions. Are you available for that?
Absolutely.
One is for you because it's an astrological question, so I'm going to read it here. Just give me a sec. I have to say that there's so much more I was hoping to get to. I wanted to share some things and I wanted to ask you more questions. And what you gave was so full and rich that I think that's totally enough for today. And I'll carry over some of the stuff to the next spiritual weather report, which is February 1st. Let's get the questions in though. The first question is from Jennifer. It was longer. I summarized it here. I'm a Pisces sun, Cancer rising, and Leo moon. And it feels like every year I'm told major positive shifts are coming for Pisces, but they never quite land the way astrologers suggest. Maybe the growth has happened in quieter ways, yet I still haven't found the fulfilling career that I'm meant for. I believe in astrology wholeheartedly, but sometimes it feels like it's just fluffing our feathers. Am I misunderstanding how to read my chart or how to use astrology to see where I really am on my path?
That's a great question and a very complex one. I'll see if I can do it justice. So, as I mentioned earlier, astrology is about archetypes and potentials, and we always have choice. So, our charts are like our blueprint, our owner's manual, our lesson plan, and it symbolizes the most fulfilling way that we can use our energy. It's not all of who we are, right? We come in with imprints, karmic, residues, past lives, if you will, other influences, and then we're conditioned, right? From day one, boys get blue, girls get pink, all kinds of sources of programming. So the map is not the territory, but it can validate what we know on a deeper level. if we can't move forward, we have to look at what's holding us back. So when we feel stuck, blocked, stymied, things aren't working out the way that we would like, we have to see what's holding us back. And that usually is processing old trauma and programming, in my experience. And the more that we clear that, the more energy we have available to move forward. So the best advice I can give people is that, is tune inwardly, especially with Pisces energy. We talked a lot about how that's about trusting your guidance. And that may not look at all like what we think it should. I did not want to be an astrologer. That was not on my list of things to do when I grew up at all. And I actively resisted it for a couple of years. I fought it. I did not want to be one of those people that, people, what people say, you believe in that stuff? And look at me with this disdain. Are you a cretin? You know, I didn't want to deal with that because 30 years ago it was more that response. So I did not want to be an astrologer. And I didn't want to be, I thought it was like being a starving artist. How can I make a living as an astrologer? Come on. You know, I wanted to be a college professor. I wanted to be an astronomer. I wanted to be something respectable, right? So I floundered for several years because I was fighting it. And I forget I think it was, what it was, I met someone who was very intelligent, very spiritual, and an astrologer and making a living at it. And she inspired me. She, well, if she could do it, maybe I could do it. And at the time, even though I'm fighting it, people were actually almost shoving money into my hand. They would, because I was doing it for all my friends. I was wanting to study it. I was sharing what I was learning. I was obsessed with it. People would say, you know what you told me last week was really helpful. I want to give you some money for that. I go, no, 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 I can't do it. I'm still learning. So I was deflecting it. I was pushing it away. I couldn't see it because I had a belief. I can't make a living as an astrologer and I can't do it. Who am I to be an astrologer? I'm too wounded myself. So because of my consensus reality, my perception, I floundered. So also if someone's struggling, and not just for this question, but for anyone, if we're struggling, look at our beliefs. What assumptions are holding us back? I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, da da da, it can't be done. Those are, and in astrology, it's interesting going back to that 12 stage developmental cycle, career is the 10th stage out of 12. The ninth stage is how we formulate our beliefs. So if we have a belief that we can't do it, we will not be able to do it. And it can be right in front of us, like it was for me, and we won't see it until we entertain the possibility that maybe not, just we don't have to believe. I don't believe in astrology. I don't believe in science. I don't believe in mythology. They're tools. I don't believe in math. You don't always say that. I don't believe in gravity. They just are, right? These are, it's not a belief system. It's a tool. You don't have to believe in anything, but how you use astrology reflects your beliefs. I believe in evolution, so I use it in an evolutionary way. If you believe in determinism, then you'll use it through that lens. So beliefs are so critical to this. So really examining what are our assumptions and and that usually goes back to prior training and often trauma. So I think that answers the question. That's the best I can think of right
Yeah,
now.
and I guess I would add for Jennifer, if I think a lot of what the astrological reading that you receive depends on the astrologer.
Yes.
Someone like Stephanie is going to give you her background of mysticism and Jungian psychology and quantum physics and the training that you got from core light with all the polarities and knowing how to work with Jungian psychology and what's in the unconscious. So someone like Stephanie brings a whole world of skill sets and insights and wisdom and love to the reading. So there are astrological readings and then there are astrological readings. And so I would recommend that you get one with Stephanie if you're really wanting to know about your career, because I would imagine that Stephanie would be able to really support you in achieving whatever it is you do want to achieve. That's kind of what you do. I've heard from people who study with you, Stephanie, that you're a master at that.
Mm, thank you. And yes, that's really, I feel my dharma. That's what I'm here to do. Help people
Mm.
remember essentially who they are and why they came. And I really especially enjoy and lately have only allowed myself to limit my readings to people that really want to do the inner work. Otherwise, there's no point. I can give information, I can give validation, but if someone isn't wanting to make the internal changes and deal with the blocks, it doesn't go anywhere. So it's a co-creative process. So I'm happy to help people remember and give them tools, and then it's up to them to do the work. Yeah. And there are many other
Wonderful.
astrologers that are also very that I'm delighted that there are many wonderful astrologers now as well. And I've actually trained some of them too, or encouraged them, to go out because we need more good astrologers, I think. Yeah.
That's it. Evolutionary astrology. Yeah, that's well said. So there's one more question. Do you feel complete with that one? Okay.
Yes.
Jennifer, thank you for your question. I think it's a brilliant question, and I'm so glad you asked it. So I hope that's helpful for you. And the second question is from Kate. She says, "Can you please address the intensity and dysregulation that so many people are feeling as 2025 ends and as the new year begins?"
Yeah.
Would you like to speak about that?
I think we touched on that quite a bit about, staying centered, dealing with the nervous system, reducing fear porn, and so on. Yeah, I don't think I can add. Do you have anything to add you'd like to add to that?
I do. I mean, I have quite a bit I can share about that, but we're almost out of time, so I'll just be quick. But um, what I would say, I know that notwithstanding everything that Stephanie just shared with us about the intensity of this time, what I know to be true is that the month of December is an especially intense time anyway, energetically, just because of all the holy days, the amount we talked about this on the last weather report, the amount of light that pours in, the Christ consciousness that comes in, also flushes up shadow. The more intense the light, the more intense the shadow. And so, especially after Christmas, you've got billions of people all over the world who celebrate Christmas, and there's this buildup, there's this lead up to Christmas Day. And when the packages are open, Christmas is over, and people didn't get what they want, quote unquote. Like the physical presence didn't give them the joy and the fulfillment that they actually really want. There's this malaise, there's this disappointment, there's this letdown that happens. And so I feel like this time, for those of us who are sensitive, it can be a very challenging time energetically because we're feeling the collective unconscious. So I guess my invitation to Kate and to anybody else who might be feeling this, a sense of dysregulation or intensity, whatever you want to call it, sometimes I call it a malaise. Sometimes it feels like a malaise around this time of year. And so I would invite you to use the opportunity to practice witnessing stronger because it's probably not even you. You're probably feeling other people. You're probably feeling the people around you. You're feeling the collective. What a waste of our energy if we make it about us, and it's not even about us. So the beauty of the witnessing practice is that you remember, I am pure awareness, I am pure consciousness, I am divine, and I am not the emotions, I am not the thoughts. They're all passing through me, and this too shall pass. And you remember who you truly are. And so you anchor yourself in the knowing that you are that. You are the pure consciousness. You are the pure awareness, the love, the joy. And it's not about spiritual bypassing. It's not about denying the feelings. It's letting yourself feel it all and let it pass through you, knowing that it's leaving. That's the key. And so, anyway, this is an invitation to everybody to just practice that. We practice it all the time, like I said before, but especially now at this time of year when it's especially intense shadow that comes up. And not only are we dealing with that, but everything that Stephanie just said. I mean, if you look at what's happening in the world right now, we just learned yesterday, I guess, that another war is happening. I don't want to go into details. I don't want to name the names of the politicians. I don't do that, but it's insane. Our planet it has a certain level of insanity that's going on right now. And so I think the spiritual weather report wouldn't be complete with at least mentioning that part, that another war, really? I mean, like What are we doing? And so I think this harkens back to Stephanie, what you were saying before, about the geopolitical changes, the intensity of our times, the massive shifting that's happening on the planet, where the light is the brightest, the shadow is the darkest, right? And so we're seeing that juxtaposed against each other. And so the thing that I think to close with is, to remember hope, remember inspiration, that we are at the end of a massive cycle and a new one is beginning. We are the midwives of this new paradigm of the heart, the way Leslie used to describe it as a new paradigm of the heart. Stephanie started her beautiful presentation with talking about this changing of the age. And we can all remember that, we are as a soul group, if you're listening to this, you're part of this soul group, I'm sure. We're here to be the midwives of this new paradigm of the heart. And it starts within us. It starts inside. So we have to remember and this is I guess if there's one message that I keep coming back to that feel like I say every spiritual weather report, it's that we have to come back to the practices that we know work for us on our spiritual path, for our spiritual awakening. Keep coming back to those practices that work for you, that help you to awaken your heart, that help you to remember the witness, that help you to choose love over fear, really. So with that, I think that's probably a good note to end on. But Stephanie, do you have any closing remarks before we have our final prayer?
Well, just to piggyback a little bit on that, speaking of a light, one of the reasons that this time of year is difficult is not only because it's the holy days, but around the solstices and equinoxes, there's a greater influx of cosmic energy. And so there's more downloads coming in, and we have solar flares ongoing that are affecting the magnetic field of the Earth and our electromagnetic field. And so we're constantly getting upgraded, and our physiology can struggle sometimes to integrate higher frequencies. So extra rest, extra hydration, extra time in nature, and absolutely doing whatever practices work for us help us to integrate these higher frequencies. So it's challenging our bodies as well as our psyches, and we're getting this downpour of light. Some days I can barely function. It's so strong. I might feel kind of knocked out, and I could be exhausted and wired at the same time. So just really take care of your body as much as you can as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. So, yeah, self-care. Remember that all of this is an inside job. We change the world by changing ourselves. That's Corlight's tagline. And just keep doing whatever practices fuel your own awakening, including what you just said. The self-care is so, so important for us right now. Before we close for today, I just want to mention I'm leading some retreats here in South Africa in April and May. There's still a few spaces available. If anybody's interested in joining me, just go to corelight.org. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see the retreats right there at the beautiful Blyde River Canyon in South Africa in April and May. So check it out if you feel called to come. I'd love to see you here. All right. So without further ado, let us have our final prayer. And so I invite you now to close your eyes, take a few long, slow, deep breaths. Just breathing in the light and breathing out any mind stuff that might have been stirred up by our conversation today. Breathing in peace and calm, and breathing out tension. Breathing in love, breathing out shadow. Deeply letting go. Feeling this beautiful field of love that surrounds us. Great Spirit, Divine Mother, Father God, Self that we all are, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for the wisdom and the love that Stephanie has shared with us today. Thank you for the field of love that we all get to share when we gather like this, whether you're here in the present moment or in the future, it's all the eternal present. So thank you for this time of the eternal present that we get to share. Thank you for all the blessings of our lives. I'm just going to read. Corley has a prayer for peace that I'd like to read. I always do this at the end, especially in these times where peace is so needed in the world. From the place of connectedness in us all, our hearts unite for peace in the world. May all my thoughts, words, and deeds make me an instrument of peace in the world. May all people and all leaders find solutions to benefit everyone equally. May the spirit of compassion and forgiveness move in and through the hearts of all people. May we all direct our actions from love for humanity and the earth. We call in blessings, protection, and courage for all who are working for universal peace, including for whistleblowers, for people in government and in positions of power. We call on the power of grace, and we give thanks, knowing that this is so. Peace, shalom, salam. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so it is. When you feel ready, slowly bring your awareness back into the room and into your body. And when you're ready, slowly open your eyes. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm so grateful.
Thank
I
you.
love you. And special thanks to Stephanie. Stephanie, thank you again. I'm so, so grateful that you took the time to be with us today to share all your love and wisdom.
Oh, a joy and great pleasure. Thank you.
All right, everybody. So until next time, we'll see you
Namaste.
February 1st. Namaste.